Hello, and welcome to Mind Your Head, a space for people to share their stories, talk openly and honestly about their own mental health challenges, and to give some listeners some comfort in knowing you're not alone. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we record this podcast, the Gubbi Gubbi people. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Indigenous peoples. We honour their enduring connection to the land, waters and culture, and recognise their invaluable contributions they make to our communities. Always was, always will be our Aboriginal land.
Today I have the honour of speaking with an inspiring individual who's not only survived the harrowing experience of domestic violence, but has emerged as a passionate advocate for change. This will also be a first for Mind Your Head, as this guest has chosen to remain anonymous to protect their privacy and well-being. In Australia, nearly 1 in 4 women have experienced violence by an intimate partner since the age of 15, which is a frightening statistic, making this issue both urgent and widespread. Our guest's journey from victim to survivor is a testament to her resilience and courage. Her story aims to raise awareness, empower others who are affected, and contribute to the broader conversation on combating domestic violence in our communities. So whether you're listening for yourself or to support someone else, this episode is a reminder that no one is alone in their struggles and that there is a path to healing. Now let's get into it. Ash, welcome to Mind Your Head. It's so nice to see you again after so many years.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I was really happy to hear from you when you first reached out, probably a couple of months ago now, but it was also met with a bit of sadness to hear about your journey that you went through, and I do want to say how brave you are that you've chosen to speak out and share your story about a topic that, you know, affects so many people, but it's often shrouded in silence.
Thank you. I have to say there was a bit of apprehension.
I
really toyed on it for quite a few weeks, but I loved what you were doing. And I think just the conversation right now is so big around this topic, and I used to carry a lot of shame about it, but there is, you know, no reason to feel like that. I think it's really important to speak out.
Absolutely. Have you spoken about it publicly before?
No, and it's something that's been in the back of my mind. To be honest, even some of my closest friends and family don't know the extent of my situation. Mm-hmm. So this will be a deep and interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure. I just want to read out some stats that I got actually. So according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 1 in 4 women, so that's 2.3 million women, have experienced violence from an intimate partner since the age of 15. On average, 1 woman a week is killed by a current or former partner, and just in Queensland alone, there are more than 100,000 cases of domestic violence every year.
Shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, those stats are just, you know, frightening and overwhelming, and I feel honoured that you've chosen to come on this podcast and share your story of domestic violence. If you're happy to, would you like to share a little bit about your upbringing and what your childhood was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the youngest of 4 girls. Mum and dad split up when I was around 11 months. I'm the youngest. It was a pretty tough upbringing for mum, I guess. She was the mum and dad for us. However, we never felt that way. We never went without it. You know, we didn't have a lot of money, but we genuinely felt like we had the best childhood. My mum is just an epic human.
She is,
yeah.
What's the relationship like with your mum and dad?
Yeah, dad, you know, has been a challenging relationship at times, but at the moment we're on really good terms.
Mm-hmm. Why has it been challenging?
I think probably just a disconnect of probably what I would expect of him. Maybe he struggles to apologise, take responsibility for his actions, and, you know, just even probably the split between my mum and him. Just
showing that empathy.
Yeah, it was from infidelity. So I think I've harboured a lot of that over the years. Mm-hmm. But, you know, now having a kid and he's really trying to make up for that and act differently and be really aware and hands-on, that's changed my perspective. I've definitely let my walls down.
I love that. So my next question was going to be, your challenges that you faced when you were growing up, and I think was it that divorce when your parents separated?
Yeah, absolutely. Mum worked 3 jobs, and like I said, money was, quite tight. So it was probably just the time with family, being both mum and dad. But for the main, it was pretty great until probably my early teens, where, I started kind of acting out and the pressures of school and trying to figure out who I was, and family challenges, all of those types of things.
So how did you cope with those sort of stresses at home? You talked about acting out at school. I don't remember that. You were like that at school. Was I like that at school?
Maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember that.
That's for another episode.
Another conversation.
I feel like I was very lost from my early teens, probably until my mid-20s, to be honest. And what we're going to talk about today, those types of events really forced me to do some work on myself and to figure out what I would and wouldn't accept in life.
Yeah.
Yep.
What were your early experiences with sort of relationships and friendships?
Yeah, I think they were pretty great. I still have some really strong friendships from when I was young. I think they are pretty great. My sisters are my best friends.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, you're super close with your sisters.
Very close. We talk all the time, and I'm very grateful for that. So I think, uncles, aunties, all really positive.
And what age were you when you kind of found yourself in an unhealthy relationship?
Yeah, so I was probably around 16 when it started, but this progressed on and off until I was around 21. Wow. He was a few years older, and we met through friends. We were at a friend's house, and we naturally gravitated towards each other, and it got pretty full on quite quickly.
Do you want to describe your experiences in those early days?
Yeah, it was fine in the early days, to be honest. I think I could not have guessed what was coming in terms of the relationship we would have and the things I would experience and endure. I thought it was pretty healthy if I look back at those early days. Yeah,
and there was no sort of, early signs that indicated something was wrong?
I don't remember any because I probably wasn't looking for them. I was wrapped up as a 16-year-old, thought it was probably...
Love.
Yeah, love with this older boyfriend, right? Probably wouldn't be able to recall even in those early days whether they were red flags.
And even like looking back on it then, probably your understanding of domestic violence probably...
Yeah, absolutely.
Wouldn't be...
No. Even, from when I was 21, if we fast forward to then... talking about it's still very much taboo. You feel like the problem, you shouldn't talk about things that make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, you're the reason.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So what's your understanding about domestic violence now? Because I think a lot of people just assume that it's the physical.
Correct.
And it's the emotional, the verbal, psychological manipulation. It's those controlling behaviours.
Absolutely.
Did you experience a lot of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember in some of the situations where things would escalate and the psychological abuse, I remember thinking I would rather just be hit and this be to be done with, because it was just the barrage and the breaking down of your character.
Really?
And you look at the statistics on how many people go back to those situations. And for me, it was around the psychological stuff. I didn't feel worthy. I felt like I was the problem because of that manipulation, that psychological kind of abuse.
So when did it take a turn? You were saying before that, at the beginning, at the start, it wasn't, it wasn't too bad.
No.
When did it get worse?
Yeah.
And in what ways did it sort of get worse?
I can't recall the timing, but I think I can pinpoint the incident. And I remember us walking back from a friend's house, and there was a person from school at that party, a guy that I was speaking to, and that's where the jealousy started coming out on our walk home. So he was getting quite aggravated about it, and because I wasn't aware of this side of him, I was kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, this is so innocent, get over it. Well, that caused a reaction, and I just remember him grabbing me and putting his hands around me and just squeezing me as tight as possible. He then, slapped me, and I instantly ran. My reflex was to run. And anyway, I ran back to his house thinking his parents would kind of calm him down, and his parents didn't intervene. We were fighting in the room next door to them where they were sleeping, and they did not intervene, and they would have absolutely have heard
Everything that was going on.
Yeah, him being physical.
Oh, so it continued?
It continued, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that was the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it got worse after that?
Yeah, it was the manipulation and the emotional abuse for sure. So that part where I said before around breaking down my personality and character, I was always the problem, and he would turn things on me. He would also, he cheated on me a number of times, and that was also, my fault. It seems so simplistic now where I am to think, why did I believe that? But when you're in it and someone is manipulating you and speaking down to you constantly, you do get in this really dark place of saying, well, wait, I am the issue. This must be me. Otherwise, why is it happening?
We don't have to keep this. We can edit this a little bit out if you want. But I actually remember. A time. I don't know if you remember this.
Is this that Friday?
Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Really? Because I remember this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it that same person?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mental.
Yeah.
Because that's always. Can I talk about it?
You can talk about it.
So sure. I remember. It might have been. It was obviously just out of school. I think I would have come back from the army, and I saw you at Fridays, and we were chatting, sort of catching up, what we're doing sort of after school and stuff. And said person came. My memory, he sort of said to you. He sort of looked at me and was like, "Who the fuck is this guy?"
Yeah.
And I remember you going, "No, it's all good. Like, he's just a friend. It's all good." And I was just like, this skinny little kid. I was like, "Oh fuck, what have I done? What have I done?" And I for some reason, that was, we talked about it was 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
But for some reason, that's always stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because the reason I think it stuck with me, because I remember your face. I remember the sort of the stress and panic in your voice.
Yeah.
And I was always like, "Oh fuck, that doesn't seem right."
Yeah. Funny you mentioned that example, because I was reflecting on this and I couldn't recall whether it was you or Brock.
No, it was me. Yeah.
There you go. So often we weren't even together then. And so he continued the manipulation when we weren't together, these fits of jealousy. Even if he had moved on, it was still the control and puppeteering. And so often if I went out, I would see him out. I used to physically get ill, and I actually thought that I was allergic to alcohol. It was anxiety. I was so on
stressed,
edge and on, just on alert whether he would pop up. And I remember a few times being out and he would lift my dress up or pinch me on the back of the arm so no one could see, or it would be the drink thrown on me and the name calling, to a point where one of the bartenders at Friday intervened and said, "What are you doing? Leave her alone." So it was those little things that people probably wouldn't catch on to, but, he was just really mindful around playing that with me.
So it wasn't just behind closed doors, it was, in public.
Yeah. To the point where some of his friends have reached out over the years. I don't know if they're still friends, to say, "I'm so sorry, I didn't do more, or I didn't say anything."
So, the friends around you could see.
Yeah.
Did they ever try to talk to you about it?
No. I think that individual probably had a bit of intimidation for them as well, perhaps. I'm not sure.
And why do you think he was like this? Is it, you know, a lot of this misconceptions is it's about, you know, you see these abusers that are, you know, alcoholics or, you know, addicted to drugs or, you know, something like that. But more often it's all about, you know, that power control and a lot of like narcissism. And
Totally.
what was his sort of personality, do you think?
I could only put it down to that perhaps this was a self-perpetuated cycle. So the fact that his parents didn't intervene, you know, sends a pretty strong message that, you know, I can only assume, is this a behaviour or trait that he's seen? Is this a cycle? His brother was also known for it. So he was dating a friend of mine, and interestingly, I would always, you know, yell at him across the table. I despised him and I, you know, would go off at him, but I was so much more careful about protecting our own image and hiding what was happening versus, you know, his brother would actually leave bruises, visible bruises on my friend, where other people could see. And once again, he was very much known for it.
And your partner at the time, would he be a bit sneaky about how he would, you know, leave bruises, I guess?
Yeah, I think he was a bit more concerned around his image than what his brother was, for sure. He was very calculated. And I think that comes through, like, even the manipulation. If we were out at a party, he would almost try and pin me against people. So because he had cheated on me, he would say, oh, such and such is interested in me, you know, she's been hitting on me. Like, he would really just manipulate situations to try and get me to act out, to look like I was the crazy one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was just so interesting thinking back on all of these moments. There was a lot of drugs around me in that group of people. I was not a drug user because I needed to maintain control. So probably the perception was because I was in that crowd that, you know,
you're participating in all this sort of stuff. But
correct.
Yeah.
I needed to maintain control. So, yeah, I don't know. I think he was just a bit more calculated.
What was the state of your mental health at that stage in your life?
Yeah, if I think about the catalyst which caused change, after that incident, I was in such a dark place, to the point where, you know, friends were really concerned because I'd lost, you know, a lot of weight. I just wasn't looking well. But through that darkness, and probably what I want to get through today in terms of messaging, like, my life is so much better when I think about what it could have been if I stayed there versus what it is now in a healthy relationship. Like, that darkness needed to come.
And what was the catalyst that night where you...
Yeah, so we had been broken up for quite some time. I would still get calls from him, and he was using ice. He'd kind of eventuated into this other group of friends and started using. And so every now and then I'd get these random calls saying, you're the reason I'm on drugs, you did this to me.
Just tormenting you.
Yeah, 100%.
How long over time did this carry on for?
Oh, years.
Years?
So, yeah, years. To the point where we were broken up and I was living in a house with some friends. And after a night out, one of his friends told me this, which was the catalyst for me to move somewhere else. But they would actually drive to my house. He would come into the house, open my bedroom door to make sure no one was in my room, close the door and leave.
While you were there?
Yes. So while I was sleeping.
While you were sleeping?
Yes. So they used to do this after the night. He would make this friend drive to my house, and he would come into the house and check that no one was in my room. And so when his friend told me that,
You had no idea?
I had no idea. I was out of that house as quickly as possible, and I moved to a different location in a secured unit complex, not a house. Had a housemate he was great. He was a chef, and we just had like a really great vibe in the home, which was a really nice reset for me. But unfortunately, his friend, one that he would, you know, partake in drugs with, moved into the same complex as me. So I remember there was like a 6-month period where I was just loving life. Yeah, right?
Surely not.
Oh, I was loving life for like 6 months. I just felt like I was getting back to myself, and, you know, the phone calls would come every now and then, but I could handle that, right? I was safe. I had my own space. I was kind of rebuilding. And then his friend obviously could see me in the car park. My car was in the number apartment bay where I was living. So that kind of formed the environment of the catalyst event that I referenced earlier, which was a pretty horrific one. So he somehow got up to my floor, and I got home from work, and he was hanging around my front door and was like, let me in. I refused. He jumped up onto the ledge of the apartment complex and said he would kill himself and jump if I didn't let him in. And this is, you know, from speaking with other people that have opened up over the years, this is actually quite a common thing that happens, is there's this kind of manipulation, like, you will make me do this, or I will end my life because of you, or this is your fault. Once again, it's that cycle. Yeah. And so obviously I'm like, don't do that, you know, get down. He kind of effectively forced himself into my place, and that was, you know, the worst night I can speak to. He held me up in our apartment. My housemate was a chef, so he wasn't there that night. He was on shift work. He worked through the night, and he held me up in our apartment, threatened me with a knife, sexual abuse, physical abuse. I had a blood lip. I had strangle marks around my neck. You know, it was just the barrage all night. I thought that kind of when the drugs would wear off, he would settle, because there was normally this cycle where it would really escalate, and you can see this look in someone's eye when they're that angry or aggressive. You can't talk them down. Like, there's no talking them down. And I was just hoping that he would kind of come to and start that groveling stage where he was, you know, kind of crying or, you know, saying sorry for what had happened, keeping in mind we'd been broken up for so long. It then continued into the next day. He made me drive him to court. He had a court appearance, which was not unusual for him. We went back to his parents' house before that, and his mum tried intervening to get me away from him, and she could not control him or reason with him. So he forced me into the car. I had to drive him to court. While he went into court, he said if I drove off in that car, he would find me and kill me. That was a promise. I'm to stay there. I stayed there. He came back, and then casually he dropped me at work, which was just so bizarre after that whole ordeal, just casually in the state I was, dropping me to work.
And that was going to be one of my questions that night. Did you fear for your life?
I definitely thought
He was going to kill you.
He was going to kill me. Like, this was it. This had gone far beyond anything. There's only one other incident where he ran up the back of my legs on a roundabout with my car, and I landed on the bonnet.
He ran you over?
Well, he came up, and it wasn't enough that obviously I was injured, but I fell flat on the bonnet. And so they're probably the two incidents where I reflect now thinking I could have easily been a statistic and my family could look very different.
Oh, fucking hell.
Yeah. And, you know, you knew me at school, and, you know, once again, some of these things, probably not to the degree that it progressed to, these things were happening, but I was very good at kind of
holding it
and kind of hiding it.
Did you talk to any of your friends or family about it?
No. So after that event, my brother-in-law actually said to me, enough's enough. If you don't do something, I will. And I believe at that time there'd been a recent change in terms of domestic violence orders or people going to the police. I think it used to be, and I could be wrong, but the victims had to kind of start a process where now other people could provide evidence or input to...
Oh, so friends and relatives and
correct,
stuff.
to get you protected.
Yeah.
Correct. So he, you know, had a very difficult conversation with me and said effectively, if you don't do something, I will. You know, if you think about your sister, what if your sister's with you and he approaches and, you know, someone else could get hurt, but obviously my concern is you first and foremost, but you need to do something.
So what was the initial stages of I guess, not leaving because you already, I guess, left the relationship. So how did it progress from there?
Yeah, after that night, I went back to my apartment and collected the belongings I needed and didn't stay there again. So continued to pay rent but stayed at a friend's house until I could get my furniture out and kind of find somewhere else more permanent. My work actually put security downstairs near my car. So there was a beautiful lady at my work who, when I turned up to work in that state, went straight into her office and told her what had happened. Yeah. And she could see I had a big fat lip. She was like, you should not be here. You know, you need to call a family member. She called my sister to come and get me, my sister and her partner. And so they actually got security for a point in time downstairs.
It's a wild, like how you're talking about it now, that you could even function to go into work. I
think that sometimes when you go through these really difficult times and you look back on them, you're like, I feel like that was a dream. Like, how
you're
did
just
I?
Numb to it,
yeah, how did I come out of the other side of that? Like, how did I put everything back together? It was a pretty dark time, as I said.
So did you eventually go to the police? Did the police get involved?
Yeah, I went and started the process to get a domestic violence order. And that's an interesting, a scary process in itself. He was actually in trouble for another very serious incident, not relating to domestic violence, but he was signing into the police station every day. And part of the domestic violence process there was that you had to go to court. You'd be standing next to a police officer that would, support you. He would be served with paperwork. And until they're served with paperwork, this was back then, the order couldn't be issued. He couldn't choose to adjourn. So anyway, I turned up to court thinking this is the day the order will be put in place. I'll be before a judge. I can get some protections in place. They hadn't been able to locate him to serve him with the documents. However, he was signing into the police station every day. And so, it just didn't make sense to me. So I said that to the judge, and the police officer said, come with me next door to the police station and let's sort this out. And I went in there and I said, this is the name, the person signing in. They're like, oh, you just missed him. I didn't want to sit down and have a coffee with him.
I don't want to see him.
No, you need to issue these documents. So had to go back again. What was really confronting about that process was there's a section of the courthouse where domestic violence or women are sat for these incidents, and there's like partitions put up, just temporary partitions put up to kind of section you off. And I remember looking at a woman across from me who was an elderly lady with bruises on her body, sitting there with what I can assume was her daughter, talking about her husband doing this to her. And I was just thinking,
what world are we living in?
Yeah, absolutely. Like someone my grandmother's age, thinking like, this is not just me at my age. This poor woman by her husband is in this state.
Yeah, fucking hell.
So, yeah, pretty confronting.
It is. And, we've talked about those misconceptions, and, you hear a lot of, I guess, uneducated or uninformed men will often comment like,
yeah,
why don't you just leave?
Yeah. It's not that easy, I can tell you. It is, when you're in it, you cannot see out of it. And so I get why people go back, but coming back to what I said earlier, it gets so much better if you can get through it and if you can break that cycle. Like, you can't change them. You cannot change individuals that want to harm, manipulate, coerce you, whether they are, financially manipulating you. You cannot change these individuals. They need help. And so the best thing you can do is get out.
And what do you think a lot of women go back? Is it that, that fear of their safety or fear of their kids or getting hurt? Is it the lack of support? Not everyone's sort of able to get that support.
Correct. I think sometimes it's like, what does starting again look like? How do you rebuild your life? I can't imagine as, a new mother that I am now, how to rebuild your life with children from that environment. So maybe it is sometimes, the psychological manipulation, yes, but maybe it is the fear of how do I even get started on this process? How do I navigate this? And then the support structures around that, what's available. I don't think many people know what is available.
So what was available for you? I remember you were saying to me that
something about on your paycheck that they can hide things that you're
Yeah.
getting support. What was that?
Yeah, so I work in corporate and I work in people and culture or HR. And so there are now things with domestic violence leave for employers to provide employees going through these situations. And so, for example, one of the things that they would do is if, say, for example, someone was seeking that leave to go and see resources, police, whatever it might be, they actually don't put down the type of leave on your pay slip. They don't, we can remove it and keep it as is, as a protection that if someone is being financially controlled, they are not able to tell that you've taken leave for this incident.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So when did it all, I guess, you served in with domestic violence papers, and so
Yeah.
when did it all come to an end?
Yeah, I believe I was 21.
21, and this started when you were about 15, 16.
Yeah. So, yeah, a long time,
Long
far
time.
too long. I mean, like I said, there were breaks between that where I was trying to rebuild but yeah, I think it took some time from 21. I was still, if I think about my relationship with my husband now, he was so patient with me because of what I'd been through.
So when did you meet him? At what age?
So funnily enough, we dated when we were very, very young. Like I think before this individual I dated.
did you? Yeah.
So
I
like
didn't
when
know
I was
that.
15 for
Right.
3 months,
Yeah.
true love. And I'm pretty sure we broke up because he turned 18 and wanted to go clubbing. So,
How old were you?
pardon?
How old were you?
I think I was like 15. So
Yeah.
Anyway, keep this part in. But we reconnected, and when I just after, or even at the end of that thing happening, that moment where I really turned things around and separated myself from that environment, we ran into each other and just started connecting over Facebook and chat, and it ended up being phone calls. We ended up being best friends for ages.
How good's that?
So good.
And let's talk about that rebuilding, your phase that you mentioned before, because I can imagine, this, the emotional toll this would have taken on you, because, you said that from your early adolescence and that time when we're developing, you're going through all this sort of trauma, really intense trauma.
Totally.
How did you rebuild your self-confidence in that image? Yeah.
I have to say, I did go a bit wild. Like after I, separated myself from that environment, was well and truly clear. I did have these friends that were fun, and we would go out and I wouldn't have the anxiety, and I could actually let loose and enjoy. Went on a Mexico girls trip and those types of things. So I think it was the group around me. Once again, they didn't know the ins and outs and everything, but some of them knew enough, and I think having those friends to be able to get me out feeling like myself again.
Enjoy life.
Oh, absolutely. I also used the EAP service, so Employee Assistance Program, which I think most employers have now, the free counselling service through my work at the time. And the initial counsellor, we just didn't have a connection, but I'm glad I persevered because I actually found a brilliant lady that I would meet with to work on myself.
What are some of the things that you would go over in therapy, if you don't mind talking about?
Yeah. We kind of built it up because it took me a long time to get to probably the depth that we needed to get to. But a lot of what had happened with the emotional and psychological abuse, I had to retrain my brain on how I was thinking. So those negative kind of voices or thoughts that would naturally come into my mind because of the environment I was with this partner, I had to retrain my brain.
Of how you view yourself.
Correct.
How you think about yourself.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It wasn't an easy process, and it took a lot of time. I still do, counselling.
You do?
Yeah, I think it's, quite healthy. When I fell pregnant, I wanted to make sure that I was, equipped with what I needed. Reflecting on how I could change and break cycles of things, have good relationships and choose how I wanted to navigate life with a child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How's your understanding of love and relationships changed since this event?
Yeah, totally. 16 years old thinking I was in love, right?
Yeah.
Versus, marrying someone that became my best friend. It was easy. He challenges me, but in the right ways. And so I think feeling safety is really important. He allows me to feel very safe. He's a very loud individual when he gets passionate about stuff.
Extrovert.
Oh my goodness. You would
Yeah.
never think it, but he gets really loud when he's passionate about stuff. So even in the early days when he would raise his voice, I would actually have to say, like, this is making me feel a bit sick in the stomach. Like, we're having a conversation. His whole family are really loud, by the way, just very loud talkers. And so when the passion goes, like the voice is elevated. So I would actually have to say, like, this, I know you're not angry at me and we're having an argument and you're not yelling at me or you're not going for my character and you're just kind of really trying to get your point across. But the volume in which you're talking to me, I need you to...
It's triggering.
I need you to bring it down.
Because, that was my next question of were there some things that you had to sort of untrain and triggers that sort of brought into this new relationship that you had to talk about with your husband,
Yeah, I think there was insecurity for sure.
For sure, yeah.
I'd been cheated on. I'd been broken down as a person. So he was very patient and tolerated a lot at the start, which of me being really accusing him of really silly things that just were not happening because of my insecurities, right?
Did you tell him everything at the beginning? So
he knew.
He knew.
He knew of this individual. He knew what I'd been through, not all of the details at that stage, but he knew enough, and he is has a very strong value on he is not, he will not tolerate that type of behaviour.
How can friends and family support someone going through something?
Yeah, it's a really big question, and I think these conversations are really important. So not necessarily talking to a domestic violence survivor. I don't like to use the word victim. I think survivor is much more empowering. So I try and use that in my mindset just to call out. But I do think it's not necessarily speaking to someone within your world that has been a survivor of domestic violence. If they are wanting to talk about it, absolutely create a safe space for them. But I think it's having the uncomfortable conversations at the family barbecue. We all have cousins, sisters, mothers, and I do talk about the female element because they're what the statistics speak to, right?
Yeah.
But it's having that conversation to say, if there is something happening or something was to happen, no questions asked, no judgment, I am a safe space, I will come and help you.
And that's the thing, that's what you've found is breaking that stigma.
Yeah.
Of women not talking about things.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so? Because does it get met with you're lying or they don't believe you or you're over exaggerating?
What is it?
Yeah, what is it?
I remember when and I first started reconnecting, one of his friends who probably knew, the reputation around my ex or even his brother, had said to him, don't date her, she's damaged goods, right? And so that type of thinking is very common. I think it's, let's not have these big, dark, deep conversations, but sometimes they're necessary to understand the impact of what this is having.
Yeah. And
you spoke to the statistics before. They are so hard to comprehend. I was reading the other day, there was in the comment section, I read through the comment section, there's a lot around we need to do more on mental health for men. But someone was like, okay, if you had a poisonous banana in a bunch, 2 bananas in a bunch that were poisonous, this would be an epidemic. This would be a real problem. But we have these people in this environment hurting individuals, and it's not loud enough.
Taken seriously enough.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
correct.
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself during this process?
I am very resilient to the point where, it does translate into my career. Being in corporate, I was trained in a law like a law firm, which was a pretty brutal environment sometimes with
Imagine.
partners.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was very young in my career starting off there. So I do think there's an element of resilience, but also awareness when I need to do some work on myself to be the best version. It sounds really cliche, but I'm very big on that. If I'm feeling low or I'm feeling like cloudy or thoughts are coming front of mind, it's probably because I need to start having that conversation and dealing with it, or thinking about some tools to put in place.
So what are your coping mechanisms? Because I know you've spoken about, you wanted to, I guess, to heal some parts of you that before you had kids, and I'm on that same process as well. I'm trying to be the best version of myself, and so when I have kids, you're never going to be perfect, or you're always going to make mistakes. But I guess my sole thing, I'm thinking about my future, and when I have kids, I'm trying to be the best version of myself. What are your sort of coping mechanisms for handling stress, all these insecurities that still might come up? You have your outlets and
absolutely. I love yoga.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I love yoga, running.
Yeah.
At the moment, I don't have enough of that, given I have a child or a little one. He consumes my time, but I do have my outlets, and it's also my family and friends and my husband. He is a safe space, and it's no conversations too big or too deep. I mean, we're not sitting there nightly at the dinner table getting really deep about things, but where the moments count for both of us, we're saying, hey, I'm not feeling myself. His mechanism for mental health is to go out and sit in the water, whether there's good surf or it's flat. So I think having an outlet is very healthy, and we create a very safe space to say, hey, I need you to kind of pick up things because I need some time to kind of work on myself.
Yeah, that's interesting, because Jordan, my partner, we know each other so well now that when I start getting, I guess, a little bit annoying, she'll go, have you gone to the gym today? Have you trained today? And I'm like, I haven't. She's like,
I can tell.
Can you go to the gym? Are you hungry? And I'm like, I'm starving. She's like, eat some food. Have you had your sauna or cold plunge? I was like, I haven't. She's like,
off you go.
Off you go.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Correct.
And it's just having that healthy, open dialogue.
Correct.
And knowing each other's sort of, what they like to do.
Yeah.
No, and Jordan's there. I'm like, do you want to make you a tea?
Yeah,
She's
correct.
Like, yeah. Do you just want to like chill out? She's like, this is a chill out.
That's right. Yeah. You need that checkpoint.
You do. You really do. You spoke about motherhood, and how's it been?
Yeah, it's the best thing. As I said to you earlier, the best job in the world, but the hardest so far. But I'm also, we didn't expect to have a wee boy, and when we had a boy, to be honest, what I've been through, I was very nervous about having a girl.
I was going to ask you this. Yeah.
Yeah, girls are very prominent in my family.
Okay. 4 girls.
And then all my nieces. Like,
really?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
So I was, expecting to have a girl, and that was playing on my mind, why I was going to see someone around that. But then when we found out in the delivery, when we had a boy, immediately following that, once I was recovering in postpartum, I was thinking, how do we do things differently to raise him? How do we allow a safe space for him to be able to regulate his emotions, identify his emotions? So even things like, I'm on to my husband about not calling him a drama queen, or that if he cries, he's not allowed to cry. So I'm really reinforcing that.
I love that.
We're reinforcing like how we want to allow him a safe space to regulate and to consider what he's feeling.
That's a massive thing with young kids, and it's something that is on the forefront of my mind too, is teaching them that it's okay to express all emotions. It's just like when they cry, you don't want them to cry, or if they're anger's a negative emotion when it's not.
Yeah, correct.
You just got to express them all healthy. And I think something that I realised when I was growing up, that my mum and dad, my dad had a really, really traumatic childhood.
Yeah.
That when he had kids, he didn't want any argument, any fighting in the house whatsoever. So they hid a lot of things from us.
Yeah, I remember that episode. It was really great.
So we all grow up thinking that you had to hide every emotion apart from happiness.
Yeah.
So you could show you that you're happy, but if you're angry or if you're stressed or you're anxious, you just had to hide it, because that's what mum and dad did. They didn't show anything from us, or we didn't show anything to them. And that, I think that just, establish that feeling of like, if I'm going through something, it's better for us, or it's safe enough.
Yeah.
We just have to internalize it.
Yeah.
So that's something that I really, really am focusing on when, I've talked to Jordan about this, is, that question, how do you want to parent?
Yeah.
that conversation.
It's a big question.
It's a big question because it goes into sort of, my background that I've grown up with, and then obviously her childhood comes into that too.
Yeah.
So we're trying to juggle that too. But I'm very blessed that we're on the same page and in teaching kids how to regulate their emotions.
Absolutely. It's so important. I think as well, we put too much pressure on people coming back to not being open. Yes, we want our kids to have resilience. They need resilience to be able to navigate life. Absolutely. We cannot fix all of their issues. However, we look at mental health statistics, we look at domestic violence. We need to change how we're doing things.
How important is it for you to share your story and break that stigma?
Yeah, really important, because I remember thinking I couldn't get out of it, or, once again, that I could change this individual. So if from this conversation there is one person that thinks, I don't deserve this, and I have the support of family and friends, and maybe it'll be a really hard journey for a while, but I can come out the other side, I think that would be great. Yeah. If it could be people are opening up the conversation and dialogue at the barbecue or at family dinner, that's great. If it's friends calling out friends on their behaviour, that's a huge one. I think that could also be really great.
How do you think society can better support victims of domestic violence? Survivors, should I say? Yeah,
I think to my last point, calling out that behaviour. It starts with, I know people, once again, coming back to the comment section, only because it interests me on this discussion. It is such a big topic, and too many people are being killed at the hands of domestic violence. And so when you read through the comment section, it's, people saying, yeah, I'm not for this, I'm not for this. It's easy to say that. You actually taking action and calling out behaviour. If your mate is talking down and being really aggressive towards his partner in public, you can't assume things are happening behind closed doors. However, that behaviour is not appropriate. And so calling out these things are important.
I totally agree with that, because there's been so many times, and I'll put my hand up, there's been so many times where I've been out and you see sort of a man and a woman that they're arguing, they're fighting over something, and you just think, oh, that's their business.
Correct.
And I've seen sometimes where a guy's come up to them and be like, guys, is everything all right? Yeah. And then, the woman's turn around and goes, mind your fucking business.
Correct.
And the guy's like, oh, fuck, yep. Sorry, I should mind my own business. And that's that stigma around it is I should mind my own business and not speak out about it.
Yeah. I mean, I live in Sydney, and very, heavily dense area with unit complexes. And there are domestic violence. Like, you can hear the screaming and the fighting, right?
In your unit complex?
Not in our unit complex, but around. I have heard incidents. Straight away, it will send the fear through my body, the guts wrenching feeling. But I am that neighbour that will go out on my back or front balcony and figure out where it's coming from, and I will call the police.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I'm that person.
I love that.
Or I will send my husband down to investigate, and he has done that before and knocked on the door. Yeah. And
that's so good of you to do that, because I've spoken to Jordan about this, and it's just something that, like, as a man, I've never thought about. I've never thought about this before, but I've never been scared for my life, or I've never feared for my life. I've never thought anywhere in the world, all the places I've been, all the situations I've been in, I've never felt unsafe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, I talked to Jordan, I talked to some of her friends, and, they have to, they have to choose their decisions so wisely around almost everything that they do in their life. If they go for a run, got to make sure it's in public where people are going to see it with street lights on. Yeah. It's got to be the time of day. Yeah. Certain places you got to go. Yeah. I know a girl who she was telling me the other day. She said she brings a taser on her walks. Wow. And I went, "Fuck, you bring a taser for your walk for?" And this is me being so naive and uneducated. And I was like, "What do you need a taser for?" And she said, "Oh, when I go for walks around the park and stuff, there's not many people around." And I went, yeah, so why do you need a taser for? She goes, Elliot,
Yeah.
there's not many people around and there's not many like, street lights and stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's all like, what? And she goes, yeah, what's happened to my friend before, so I'd rather like have it than not. And that's just a daily normal
Yeah.
thing that is happening.
Yeah.
That is just, I still...
Yeah, it's once again really hard to fathom, right? We're the lucky country, and we live in these beautiful destinations. But of course, what comes with that, it doesn't necessarily mean, the communities and the surroundings are safe.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I still sometimes get moments where I know that I'm not being rational in my thinking,
Yeah.
and I'm probably very likely safe. However, it doesn't leave your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's this is a male violence problem, and I don't like the culture at the moment that makes women feel unsafe. And there's this thing that, there's that question that happened a few months ago where women would rather choose the bear in the forest than the man.
Yeah.
I watch a
crazy.
lot of National Geographic. I watch a lot of Animal Planet. Bears will fuck you up.
They are terrifying.
They are terrifying.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it that the world that we're living in now, that women feel safer
Yeah.
to choose a bear in the forest than a man.
Correct. And I think you actually said this to me, and I think it's very widely shared, but it is now feels like a women's issue to fix.
Yeah, it's a male problem that women have been forced to fix.
Correct. Yeah. So, I'm not across the most recent government resources or investments, but there needs to be more done. But in the absence of that, people need, family, friends and safe places around them without judgment to remove them from these situations.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, I think you've just answered, but, I was going to ask you, in your opinion, what role can men play in challenging the, societal norms?
Yeah.
But it's all about that education, and also, calling out mates.
It is. And if you recognise some of these traits in yourself, get help. Understand why they're there, because there is no reason, no matter what you've been through, no matter your mental health, there is no reason for you to inflict that type of psychological or physical harm on another individual or fear. There is no default reason for that. There's no excuse. And so if there are traits that are coming through that you identify as, okay, I'm being quite aggressive or I'm having frustrations and I don't know how to channel them, get help.
Because help is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What advice would you share with anyone listening that might be experiencing what you went through, or even just left a domestic violence relationship?
Yeah, I think, you will rebuild. You will rebuild. It takes work, and yes, it's scary, and you will feel vulnerable and exposed at times, but it does get better.
It does. There's
So
hope.
much better.
Yeah.
So much better than that life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it wild to think about now that the things that happen to you, even speaking it out loud, you just think, what the
Yeah, I feel like I'm telling someone else's story. It's weird to think that this was my life and what happened to me. Yeah.
So we've got some quick fire questions to end.
Go for it.
Go for it. So you can answer these as long or as short as you like. How have you defined success in your life?
Relationships.
Relationships?
Yeah, with family and friends, 100%. How I value and show up for those and who I have around me, for sure.
Yeah. What are your non-negotiables for living a healthy and full life? You talked about yoga.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a healthy and full life is the balance or holistic view of mental versus health. And then I would also include, again, relationships, right?
Yeah.
That the value I place on those is so high.
If you could go back and tell the 15-year-old Ash one bit of advice,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Oh, so many things
How good
to that.
hindsight.
Yeah. How long have we got?
Yeah.
No, I'm only kidding.
Just one bit of advice.
Yeah. I think it's so corny, but just to keep pushing, just, to not lose hope or not lose sight of what's important.
Yeah. How has what you have gone through impacted the way that you want to raise your kids?
Yeah. I will feel like I have failed as a parent if my children are not kind and understanding to what every individual is going through, including themselves. I want them to be really self-reflective. Yep.
Yeah. I can't thank you enough for coming on. Firstly, even just reconnecting with you again, it's been so nice to see you. I can't thank you enough for just sharing your story and having the courage and bravery to speak out about this. I know that's obviously, you're still feeling it. I know that there's probably parts of it that you'll feel, forever.
Yeah.
I really admire you for speaking out.
Well, thank you for allowing me to have the space to do it. It's once again a really important topic, and thank you for creating a platform.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Mind Your Head. If you'd like to support the show, be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really supports the show and helps others discover us. Don't forget to join us on Instagram and TikTok at mindyourhead.podcast.